There is a 1-year-old baby sitting in a high chair in Quahog, Rhode Island, and he has been trying to kill his mother since before he could walk. Not metaphorically, not as a phase, with laser guns and time machines and a machine gun on the deck of a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. For 6 seasons of Family Guy, Stewie Griffin built weapons, ran plans, and aimed all of it at one target, the woman making pancakes on the other side of the kitchen. She never noticed, he never stopped. And the only other person in that house who knew the whole truth decided every single day that it probably was not worth mentioning. This is every attempt, every weapon, every failure, and the one time it almost was not a failure. And the conversation, 450 episodes later, that finally explained what all of it was actually about. Welcome to Red Umbrella. Let's get into it. The pilot introduces the obsession. Quote 0, Season 1, Episode 1. Family Guy premiered on January 31st, 1999, right after Super Bowl 33. Millions of people tuned in, expecting something fun to watch after the game. What they got was a cartoon family sitting down to dinner, and a 1-year-old baby quietly finishing the construction of a mind control device at the table. That baby was Stewie Griffin, and the first thing the show ever did with him was have his mother take his weapon away. Lois Griffin reached across the dinner table, picked up what she assumed was one of Stewie's toys, and told him toys were not allowed during dinner. She had no idea what it actually was. She had no idea her infant son had spent who knows how long building a device capable of controlling human minds. She just saw something that looked like a toy, and she took it away the way any reasonable mother would. Simple, routine, completely unbothered. Stewie sat there and watched her do it. That one moment, that exact exchange in the very first scene of the very first episode, is the whole show in miniature. Stewie with his elaborate plans, Lois with her cheerful obliviousness, the enormous gap between what is actually happening in that house and what Lois thinks is happening. The show did not build up to this over several episodes. It did not wait for the audience to get comfortable before introducing Stewie's darker side. It put it right there in the opening minutes, like a business card. This is who these people are. This is how this works. What makes the moment so clean is that Lois is not being portrayed as stupid. She is not missing something obvious. From her point of view, she is doing exactly the right thing. You do not let a toddler play with toys at the dinner table. That is reasonable parenting. The joke is that she is completely correct in her behavior and completely wrong about what is actually happening, and she will never know the difference. The audience knows. Stewie knows. Nobody in that house will ever put it together. That dynamic, established before the show had even finished introducing its characters, would run underneath every Stewie scene for the next 6 seasons. There is also a second weapon in that first episode. Beyond the mind control device that Lois confiscates at dinner, Stewie has a laser gun, disguised to look like a sandwich. He uses it in another attempt to kill Lois in that same episode. A laser gun disguised as a sandwich. The show is not being subtle about what kind of character Stewie is. It is announcing him loudly, gleefully, without any build-up or explanation. Here is a baby. The baby has a laser gun made to look like food. The baby wants to kill his mother. Welcome to Family Guy. The pilot also gives the audience the first real look at how Stewie thinks about Lois. He does not hate her the way a person hates someone who wronged them. He hates her the way a supervillain hates the person standing between them and their goals. His matricidal obsession, that word means wanting to kill your mother, which is not a word most shows would ever need, is not personal in the emotional sense. It is logistical. Lois keeps getting in the way. She takes his weapons. She interrupts his plans. She treats him like an infant, which is technically what he is, but which he finds deeply insulting, given that he is clearly operating at a level of intelligence that has no business existing inside a 1-year-old body. The show's explanation for this, which gets reinforced in later episodes, is that Stewie spent 9 months in Lois's womb and experienced it as imprisonment. He refers to it elsewhere in the series as his ovarian Bastille, Bastille being the famous French prison, which tells you everything about how Stewie's brain works, and nothing about why a baby would frame his own birth in those terms. But the point is that from Stewie's perspective, he and Lois have been at war since before he was born. She contained him, he escaped. She continues to interfere with his plans. He wants her gone. That's the whole backstory, delivered through character behavior, rather than explained in a monologue. By the end of the pilot episode, Stewie has already demonstrated something important. He is willing to temporarily set aside his hatred of Lois when it serves him. When Peter gets sentenced to prison at the end of the episode, Stewie pulls out his mind control device, the same one Lois confiscated, which he apparently got back, and uses it to force the judge into letting Peter go free. Not because he loves Peter, not because he cares about the family, because he is a baby, and babies need their parents nearby, regardless of whether they are plotting those parents' deaths. He needs Lois to be alive and present and functional. He just also wants her dead. These two things exist in him simultaneously, and the show never treats this as a a contradiction worth resolving. Seth MacFarlane created Stewie and voices him throughout the entire series. MacFarlane described the character early on as an evil Rex Harrison. Rex Harrison being a British actor famous for his precise, clipped, somewhat pompous way of speaking. That description tells you exactly what Stewie sounds like, and exactly why a baby talking that way is funny. The accent is upper-class British. The vocabulary is enormous. The targets of his contempt are broccoli, nap time, and his mother. MacFarlane built the comedy of Stewie almost entirely on the contrast between the sophistication of the voice and the smallness of the life it is coming from. The pilot also establishes Brian as the only other character in the house who is fully aware of what Stewie is doing. Brian is the family dog, an anthropomorphic, talking, martini-drinking dog who is in many ways more culturally sophisticated than any human in the house. He sees Stewie clearly. He understands that Stewie is genuinely trying to kill Lois. He does not alert anyone. He does not warn Lois. He essentially watches the whole thing play out with a kind of tired, skeptical detachment, because he has already calculated that Stewie probably will not succeed, and warning Lois would only make Brian sound like he had lost his mind. This witness structure is load-bearing for the entire run of the gag. Without Brian as a knowing audience inside the show, every Stewie scene would be purely abstract comedy. A baby swinging weapons at a wall while the world looks the other way. Brian gives it an anchor. Brian is the proof that what is happening is real within the show's universe, that it is not a cutaway fantasy or a one-off joke. Brian knows. Brian just also does not particularly feel like doing anything about it. What the pilot accomplishes in terms of establishing Stewie's relationship with Lois is something most shows would take several episodes to build. By the time the opening credits had rolled on the very first episode, the audience already understood the basic mechanics of their dynamic. Lois is unaware, Stewie is armed. The situation will never resolve in any permanent way, and somehow this is going to be played primarily for laughs. The laser gun disguised as a sandwich is worth sitting with for a second, because it is not just a weapon, it is a statement about how Stewie operates. He does not grab a kitchen knife. He does not act in any way that a real infant could act. He builds, he engineers, he disguises. The weapon being hidden inside something as harmless and domestic as a sandwich is the show telling you that Stewie's danger is invisible. It looks like lunch. It looks like something a baby would be holding. Nobody is going to look at a baby holding what appears to be food and think threat. That is the gag. And it is also the entire premise of the character, that the most dangerous person in that house is the one who looks the least dangerous. Lois, in the pilot, is warm and competent and completely consumed by the ordinary demands of running a house and managing a family. She is dealing with Peter. She is dealing with the kids. She is making dinner and handling whatever the day throws at her. Stewie barely registers as a threat because Stewie barely registers at all beyond normal baby concerns. She takes his toy. She does not notice the laser. She moves on to the next thing. This will be her default setting for the entire run of the original Matricide arc. Pleasantly engaged with everything that is not Stewie's actual inner life, completely unseeing of the one thing that would change every interaction they have ever had. The show premiered in 1999. Stewie was not immediately a cultural phenomenon. It took the show time to build its audience, and as has been well documented, Family Guy was actually canceled after its third season before being brought back. But even in that first episode, before anyone knew what the show would become, before Stewie had appeared on a single piece of merchandise, the writers established something that would turn out to be one of the most durable comedic relationships in animated television history. A 1-year-old baby with a laser gun disguised as a sandwich, sitting at a dinner table, watching his mother carry away his mind control device. That is where it starts. And what is remarkable about everything that comes after, the time machines, the carbonite guns, the robotic decoys, the speedboats, the machine guns on cruise ships, is that it all traces back to that one dinner table scene. The scale would get bigger, the weapons would get more sophisticated, the attempts would get more elaborate, but the structure never changed. Stewie builds something. Lois takes it away, or ignores it, or survives it. Stewie goes back to the drawing board. __quote _1__. The next section covers how the show built an entire mythology around Stewie's hatred of Lois. A mythology involving his birth, a mysterious figure in white, and a weapon that could freeze a man in solid carbonite, all during a birthday party that Lois was just trying to hold together. Section 2, The Birthday Episode and the Mythology of the Womb. Chitty Chitty Death Bang, Season 1, Episode 3. Most kids look forward to their first birthday party. Cake, balloons, family gathered around singing, the whole thing. It is supposed to be a celebration, the first full year of life, survived and commemorated. Stewie Griffin was terrified of his, not because of the party itself, not because of the guests or the noise or anything a normal baby might find overwhelming. Stewie Stewie was terrified because he had done the math. 1 year ago, he had escaped from Lois's womb. He had fought his way out. He had broken free from what he considered a 9-month imprisonment inside a woman he already despised. And now the first year was up, and Stewie had become convinced, with absolute, unwavering certainty, that a mysterious figure in white was coming back to collect him, coming back to undo the whole escape, coming back to put him right back inside. This is the premise of Chitty Chitty Death Bang, the 3rd episode of the 1st season of Family Guy. It is the episode where Stewie turns 1, and it is the episode where the show stops treating his hatred of Lois as just a running joke about a weird baby with a laser gun, and starts building it into something that has its own internal logic, its own history, its own mythology. The show is explaining, in the most absurd terms possible, why Stewie feels the way he feels, and somehow, through the sheer commitment of the writing, it almost makes sense. The man in white, as Stewie calls him, is the doctor who delivered him at birth. That is the real-world explanation. In Stewie's head, he is something far more threatening. He is the agent of return. He is the one who originally tried to pull Stewie into the world, or, from Stewie's perspective, the one who ambushed him on his way out. Stewie has spent the entire first year of his life waiting for this figure to come back and drag him into Lois's womb again, which Stewie elsewhere in the series refers to as his ovarian Bastille. Bastille is the name of a famous French prison. Stewie is describing his own mother's body as a jail he escaped and might be thrown back into. This is not something the show ever explains in a calm, straightforward way. It unfolds through Stewie's behavior, his anxiety about the upcoming party, his paranoia about men in white clothing, his certainty that the first birthday represents some kind of deadline. Lois, meanwhile, is dealing with an entirely separate crisis. She had booked Cheesy Charlie's, a restaurant that is clearly a version of Chuck E. Cheese's, for Stewie's party. Peter, sent to drop off the deposit check, lost his watch in one of the arcade claw machines, got into a confrontation with the manager, and in his anger declared that the family would be taking the party elsewhere. He then spent the entire episode scrambling to put together a replacement birthday party, eventually rerouting an entire circus into the Griffin's backyard. Lois does not know about any of this. She thinks the party at Cheesy Charlie's is booked and confirmed. She has enough to deal with, including the fact that Meg has made a new friend named Jennifer, who turns out to be connected to a suicide cult, a subplot that runs parallel to the Stewie story and eventually collides with it at the worst possible moment. None of this touches Stewie. Stewie is not at the party planning stage of his thought process. Stewie is at the airport. He has decided that the best way to deal with the man in white is to run. He gets himself to the airport, apparently alone, a 1-year-old navigating public transportation with the calm confidence of someone who has done this before. At the airport, he is intercepted by a staff member who offers him some advice about how running away from your problems never actually solves anything. Stewie listens to this. He considers it, and then, in what is genuinely one of the more strange character moments the show had produced at this early stage, he decides the staff member is right. He wishes him well, and then, almost as a casual afterthought, freezes him in carbonite before heading back home to face his fear. The carbonite freeze gun is real. It is listed in the show's records as one of Stewie's weapons from this episode, a gun that can encase a person in solid carbonite, the same material used to freeze Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. Stewie uses it on a security guard at the airport, and the freeze lasts approximately 10 years, according to the show's own documentation of the incident. He then just walks away. The security guard is a block of carbonite for a decade, and the show never addresses it again because that is how Family Guy handles collateral damage in Stewie scenes. It happens, it is treated as incidental, and the plot moves on. Back at the house, the party situation is deteriorating. Peter has managed to get a circus into the backyard, but the scramble to pull it together has required him to make a deal that involves letting Meg go to her new friend Jennifer's party, which is the same day as Stewie's celebration. Lois is furious when she finds out. The whole family is needed for Stewie's birthday. That is the priority. That is what the day is supposed to be about. Peter, to his credit, eventually figures out that having the family together matters more to Lois than the party itself. He goes to retrieve Meg, discovers that Jennifer's gathering is actually a meeting for a suicide cult. The cult members drink poisoned punch while Peter and Meg slip away just in time, and brings everyone back together for Stewie's celebration. Peter even drinks from the punch bowl himself before realizing what it is and pulling Meg clear. The cult leader follows them back to the Griffin house wearing a ceremonial white robe, a man in white, walking towards Stewie. Stewie sees him and has no doubt about what this means. This is the man in white. This is the one he has been afraid of all year. He corners the cult leader in the Griffin household and vaporizes him with his laser rifle. Not freezes, vaporizes. Gone. The threat eliminated, Stewie rejoins the birthday party feeling victorious. The actual man in white, the doctor, the threat Stewie had built an entire entire year of anxiety around, never appeared. Stewie destroyed a cult leader who happened to be wearing the wrong color clothing, declared the danger over, and went to have cake. This is one of the funnier structural jokes the show ever built around Stewie, precisely because it happens entirely in his head. The man in white was never coming. The first birthday was never a deadline for anything. Stewie built a mythological threat out of the normal, confused memories of an infant who does not fully understand how he got here or what it means. And then he resolved that threat by vaporizing an innocent man, well, a cult leader, so perhaps not entirely innocent, who had no idea what he was walking into. What the episode does for Stewie's character beyond the comedy is significant. It gives him a backstory that explains his hatred of Lois without reducing it to something simple. He does not hate her because she is mean to him. She is not mean to him. Lois is warm and attentive and genuinely loving toward her youngest child. She has no idea he despises her. His hatred comes from something deeper and stranger, from the fundamental act of being born, of being brought into a world he did not choose, through a process he experienced as an escape from confinement. Lois is the confinement. Lois is the womb. Lois is the reason he was imprisoned for 9 months before he could fight his way out. It is completely absurd. It is also, within the show's own terms, completely consistent. And once the show establishes this mythology in the 3rd episode, every subsequent attempt on Lois's life has that backstory underneath it. Stewie is not just a weird, violent baby. He is a baby with a specific grievance, a specific origin story for that grievance, and a specific target. The birthday episode also does something important for the relationship between Stewie and Lois that often gets overlooked in discussions of the show. For one brief moment, during the chaos of the party preparations, the show lets you see why Lois bothers. She is not just the obstacle in Stewie's story. She is someone who genuinely wants the family around for her youngest child's first birthday. She wants Meg there. She wants everyone there. She is upset when Peter lets Meg go somewhere else because she understands, instinctively, that these moments with a 1-year-old are not repeatable. You do not get the first birthday twice. Stewie, of course, would prefer never to have had it at all. The gap between those two perspectives, Lois wanting to celebrate the day her youngest was born, Stewie treating that same anniversary as the deadline for a threat against his freedom, is where all of the comedy in their relationship lives. They are never talking about the same thing. They are never experiencing the same moment. Lois sees a birthday party. Stewie sees the anniversary of his escape and the potential return of his captor. One of them is holding balloons. The other is holding a laser rifle. There is also something worth noting about the weapon choices in these early episodes. The laser gun disguised as a sandwich in the pilot. The carbonite freeze gun in this episode. The laser rifle that vaporizes the cult leader. These are not weapons a baby would have access to in any normal sense. They are not even weapons that exist in the real world. Stewie builds them. He engineers them from scratch. The show is telling you, through the weapons alone, that this is not a baby operating at baby levels. Whatever intelligence is running inside that football-shaped head is operating at a level that the weapons themselves make visible. You do not need Stewie to explain his IQ. You just need to look at what he is carrying. And Lois sees none of it. She takes what looks like a toy. She misses the laser gun in the sandwich. She does not notice the carbonite freeze gun. She is organizing a birthday party while her son is freezing airport workers in solid carbon and vaporizing cult leaders in the living room. She kisses him on the head and tells him happy birthday, and he sits there having just eliminated what he believed was an existential threat, and the moment between them is tender and completely disconnected from anything that actually happened that day. By the end of Chitty Chitty Death Bang, the show has built something that will last for 6 seasons. It has given Stewie a reason for his hatred, the womb, the escape, the ovarian Bastille, that is absurd enough to be funny and specific enough to feel real within the show's world. It has shown Lois as someone who will never understand the thing happening in her own house. It has introduced the weapons, the mythology, and the gap between them. The first birthday ends with cake and family and Stewie feeling victorious over a threat that was never actually there. __quote _3 ___. The next section moves forward to an episode where the threat Stewie is dealing with is very real, very physical, and located entirely inside his own gums, and where his solution involves building a machine capable of bending time itself, just to avoid the discomfort of teething. Section 3. The Time Machine and the Teething Arc. Quote 4. Season 1, Episode 4. Teething hurts. Any parent who has watched a baby go through it knows what it looks like. The crying, the fussing, the chewing on everything within reach, the general misery that comes with tiny new teeth forcing their way through sensitive gums for the first time. It is painful, and there is not much you can do about it except wait for it to pass. Most babies cry. Stewie Griffin built a time machine. Mind Over Murder is the 4th episode of the first season of Family Guy. It is not primarily remembered as a Stewie kills Lois episode in the traditional sense. There is no laser gun, no carbonite, no direct attempt on her life in this particular installment. What it is, however, is one of the clearest early pictures of how Stewie's mind works, what he is willing to build to solve a problem, and what happens when the things he creates stop being under his control. It is also the episode that shows, more plainly than almost anything before it, the specific texture of Stewie's frustration with Lois, the way he rages at her, begs her, shakes her by the shirt, and gets nothing back except the warm, blank patience of a mother who thinks her baby is just fussy. The teething pain starts the episode. Stewie is in agony. His gums are destroying him from the inside out, and he cannot make it stop. He tries to communicate this to Lois with the full force of his vocabulary and his outrage and his contempt for the situation, and she looks at him and says she knows he is hurting and that Mommy has to clean the house. Mommy has to clean the house. Stewie grabs her by the shirt. He shakes it. He tells her, for the love of God, to shake him like a British nanny. Lois sighs. She keeps moving. She has a house to clean and a piano lesson to manage and whatever Peter has done today to deal with, and her youngest child is fussy in the way babies get fussy. And she does not have time right now. This exchange, which is confirmed in the episode's own dialogue, is the scene that captures everything about their dynamic that the previous two episodes had been building toward. Stewie is not being vague. He is not throwing a tantrum in some undefined infant way. He is speaking full sentences. He is expressing a specific physical complaint with precise language. He is telling her exactly what he needs. And Lois hears a fussy baby. She has always heard a fussy baby. She will always hear a fussy baby. The communication gap between them is not just a running joke. It is the foundational tragedy of their relationship, played here for comedy, but structured in a way that makes you feel the frustration on both sides. Because Lois is not wrong either. She does not know what Stewie is saying. She cannot hear his words the way the audience hears them. From her side of the interaction, her baby is upset, and she is telling him she loves him and she will be with him in a little while. She is not being cruel. She is being a mother with a full day in front of her who cannot stop everything for every moment of infant distress. Stewie goes back to his room, and he builds a time machine. Not a rough draft, not a prototype, a working time machine. A device capable of moving everyone in the house forward through time, past the teething phase, into a future where his gums are fine and the pain is behind him. The logic is straightforward from where Stewie is standing. The teething will end eventually. All he needs to do is get to the eventually faster. So he builds the machine, uses it, and moves time forward. The teething pain goes away. Problem solved. Except the machine's plans, the schematics, the blueprints for how the time machine works, become public. This is where the episode's main complication for Stewie kicks in. The plans get out, other people now have access to the design. And a time machine design becoming publicly available is, from Stewie's perspective, a catastrophic security breach. He cannot allow the machine to exist in the world outside his control. He cannot allow other people to use something he built for his own purposes. So he has to go back. He has to move time in reverse and undo the whole thing. Go back to before he used the machine, before the plans went public, before any of it happened, which means going back to the teething pain. He does it anyway. He reverses time, returns to the exact moment before he made the forward jump, and accepts that the teething is going to continue because the alternative, letting the machine's plans circulate, is worse. The episode ends with Peter tripping on the time machine and destroying it, injuring his leg in the process, and also preventing him from taking Chris to his soccer match. Stewie is left sitting with the pain again. He built a time machine, he used it, he undid it, and he is exactly where he started, except now the machine is broken. This is the pattern that defines almost all of Stewie's plans in the early seasons of Family Guy. Not just the attempts to kill Lois, but everything. He builds something extraordinary, he deploys it, something goes wrong, or the plan has side effects he did not fully account for, or the universe conspires in some mundane way to unravel what he put together, and he ends up back at square one. The ambition is always enormous, the execution is always technically brilliant, the results are always somewhere between incomplete and actively counterproductive. What Mind Over Murder adds to the Stewie and Lois dynamic specifically is the emotional texture underneath the violence. In the pilot and in Chitty Chitty Death Bang, Stewie's hatred of Lois is mostly expressed through weapons and plots. Here, in the teething scene, it is expressed through desperation. He is not plotting her death in this moment. He is begging her to help him. He is grabbing her shirt and shaking it and asking her to do something, anything, about the pain he is in. And she cannot. Not because she does not care, but because she does not understand what he is actually saying. That desperation matters. It reframes the violence slightly. When Stewie reaches for a weapon, it is always partly because reaching out in any other way has never worked. He is has tried talking, he has tried the direct approach, he has grabbed the woman by her shirt and begged her in the most explicit terms possible and gotten a loving, empty response about how mommy has to clean the house. The weapons are not just evil genius behavior. They are the behavior of someone who has run out of any other option that might actually land. This does not make the murder attempt sympathetic in any simple way. The show is not asking you to feel sorry for Stewie's situation, but Mind Over Murder is the episode that plants the seed for something more complicated than pure supervillain comedy. The suggestion that underneath the planning and the weapons and the accent and the enormous vocabulary, there is a baby who is in pain and cannot make the person responsible for his care understand that. The episode also contains one of the clearest examples of how casually the show treats Stewie's technology. A working time machine, in the first season, used to solve a teething problem. The show does not treat this as an event. There is no ceremony around the fact that a 1-year-old has bent the laws of physics to avoid dental discomfort. It is presented as a practical solution to a practical problem, the same way you might give a baby a cold teething ring, except instead of a ring, it is a device that moves everyone in the household forward through time. The gap between the scale of the technology and the smallness of the problem it is solving is where the joke lives, and it is a very good joke, told with complete deadpan commitment. Lois's role in this episode is also worth examining on its own terms. She is not present for the time machine. She is not aware of it. She does not know that her household briefly existed in a different point in time because her infant son had sore gums. She is cleaning the house and managing the day and dealing with Peter, who in this episode builds an illegal bar in the basement after having a vision involving a beer bottle label and a reference to the movie Field of Dreams. The bar becomes a hit. Lois eventually ends up performing there. The house catches fire. Stewie uses the time machine to reverse everything before the fire kills anyone. So the time machine, in addition to solving the teething problem, also saves the family from dying in a basement fire. Stewie does not get credit for this. Nobody knows it happened. Brian takes Stewie's time machine and reverses time to before the fire starts, and then Peter trips on it and breaks it. And the version of events the family lives through is the one where the fire never occurred because Stewie's technology prevented it. And Stewie cannot tell anyone because nobody can hear him. There is something almost poetic about that, though the show is not asking you to linger on it. Stewie's technology saves his family. His mother is alive partly because of what her baby built in his room. She will never know. She will continue to take his weapons away at dinner and interpret his attempts at communication as fussiness, and he will continue to plot her death. And the time machine that saved everyone will sit broken on the floor until Peter steps on it. The damage done to the machine matters beyond this episode. Stewie's time machine gets destroyed before he has a chance to use it for anything else. He will build other machines. He will build more sophisticated ones as the show progresses. But in season 1, in episode 4, the machine that represented his most powerful tool in the early going gets crushed under Peter's foot by accident, casually, as a throwaway moment at the end of an episode about something else entirely. That is also very much the show's pattern. Stewie's greatest achievements get undone not by some worthy opponent, not by Lois finally waking up to what is happening, but by the ordinary chaos of a house with Peter Griffin in it. Peter trips on the machine. The plans leak. Something mundane interferes. The infant genius is brought back to Earth not through any failure of his own intelligence, but through the constant low-level disaster of his domestic environment. Mind Over Murder is 4 episodes into the first season of a show that had not yet found its full audience. It is not the episode most people point to when they talk about classic Stewie moments, but it does something the louder, more obviously comedic episodes do not quite manage. It shows Stewie at his most human, sitting in real physical pain, reaching out in the only ways he knows how, getting nothing back, and then building something extraordinary out of sheer refusal to accept the situation. He built a time machine because his gums hurt and his mother was busy. That is Stewie Griffin in a single sentence. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The weapons in these early episodes tell you a lot about what the show was building. Laser guns, freeze guns, time machines, each one bigger than the last. But the real inventory, the full catalog of everything Stewie constructed in the name of solving his problems and eliminating his obstacles, goes far beyond what the first 4 episodes can contain. The next section lays out the complete arsenal, from the sandwich laser to the microscopic battlecruiser that Stewie flew into his own father's body, and what each weapon reveals about which version of Stewie we are dealing with at any given point in the show. Section 4. Stewie's Arsenal, a chronological inventory of his weapons. There is a version of Stewie Griffin that most casual viewers know, the one on the t-shirts and the bumper stickers and the phone cases, the baby with the football head and the red overalls, holding a laser gun, looking vaguely threatening. That image became one of the most recognized pieces of animated merchandise in the history of television. It got on everything. It was everywhere. What that image does not capture is the full scope of what Stewie actually built. The laser gun is the beginning. It is the entry point, the thing that signals what kind of character this is. But across the first 6 seasons of Family Guy, Stewie constructed and deployed a collection of weapons and machines that goes so far beyond a single laser gun that listing it all in one place almost feels absurd. Almost. The list is real. Every item on it appeared in a specific episode, was used for a specific purpose, and tells you something specific about where Stewie was in his ongoing war against the world around him, and against Lois in particular. Start at the beginning. The pilot episode, Death Has a Shadow, gives you 2 weapons in the first installment of the series. The first is the mind control device that Lois takes away at the dinner table in the opening scene. This is not a weapon in the direct sense. It does not shoot anything or cause physical harm. What it does is override another person's decision-making. Stewie uses it at the end of the pilot on the judge presiding over Peter's welfare fraud case, forcing the judge to let Peter go free. It works. The judge's eyes go swirly, which is how the show indicates the device has taken hold, and Peter walks out of court. The device served its purpose. Stewie got what he needed. And then, Lois probably put it in a box somewhere. The second weapon from the pilot is the laser gun disguised as a sandwich. This one is exactly what it sounds like. A laser gun, made to look like a sandwich. Stewie uses it in another attempt to kill Lois in the same episode. The disguise is the point. It is designed to look like something harmless and domestic, something a baby might reasonably be holding at a kitchen table or in a high chair. Nobody looks at a baby holding what appears to be lunch and thinks, danger. That is the entire strategic logic of the weapon. Hide the threat inside something that belongs in the background of a normal family home. The laser gun in sandwich form does not succeed in killing Lois. Nothing in season 1 does. But as a piece of engineering, it is remarkable, not for its power, but for its design philosophy. Stewie is not just building weapons. He is thinking about how to make them invisible. He is thinking about context and appearance, and what will make something go unnoticed in the environment it is deployed in. That is not the thinking of someone who is just angry. That is the thinking of a strategist. Episode 3, Chitty Chitty Death Bang, introduces the carbonite freeze gun. Stewie uses this one at the airport on a staff member who has the bad luck of crossing his path while wearing what Stewie considers an acceptable outfit for a conversation. The freeze lasts approximately 10 years based on the show's own records of the incident. The man is encased in solid carbonite, the same material from the same science fiction source as Han Solo's famous imprisonment in The Empire Strikes Back, and Stewie walks away and goes home to his birthday party. The carbonite freeze gun is notable because it is the first weapon that causes a consequence that the show fully acknowledges and then completely ignores. A man is frozen for 10 years. Nobody investigates this. Nobody notices. The plot moves on. Episode 4, Mind Over Murder, brings the time machine. This has already been covered in detail in the previous section, but in the context of the full arsenal, it belongs here too, because it represents a significant shift in what Stewie is building. The first 2 weapons, the mind control device and the laser gun, are attack weapons. They are designed to affect other people. The carbonite gun is a restraint weapon. It immobilizes. The time machine is something different entirely. It is an environmental weapon. It does not target a specific person. It changes the conditions of reality itself. Instead of attacking someone or immobilizing someone, Stewie bends the timeline to remove a problem he does not want to deal with. The problem happens to be teething. The scale of the solution is wildly out of proportion to the problem. That disproportion is, again, the point. Season 2 brings a weather control device, documented in the episode I Never Met the Dead Man. Stewie builds a machine capable of controlling the world's weather. The stated purpose is to destroy broccoli, a food Stewie despises with the same intensity he brings to everything he despises, which is considerable. A device capable of controlling global weather patterns, built to eliminate a vegetable from the food supply. The weapon is enormous in its potential reach. The target is broccoli. This is one of the show's favorite tricks with Stewie, the massive tool deployed against the small, personal irritant. The world's weather is now under the control of a toddler who does not want to eat his greens. The Mission Impossible, Season 3, Episode 11, is the episode where Stewie's engineering reaches what might be its most creative peak in the early years of the show. Peter and Lois decide they want to have another baby. Stewie hears this news and immediately identifies the threat. Another child means less attention, less resources, a potential rival. He resolves to stop the conception from happening. He builds 2 separate machines to accomplish this. The first is called Peterbot. It is a robotic version of Peter, a mechanical replica of his father, designed to take Peter's place in the bedroom and therefore prevent any situation that might lead to a new pregnancy. The robot is designed designed to look like Peter and to behave like Peter, with the goal of substituting for him at the key moment without Lois noticing the switch. Chris accidentally knocks Peterbot out a window before it can be deployed, which is a very Family Guy way for a plan to fail. Not through any opponent outmaneuvering Stewie, but through his brother stumbling into the room at the wrong moment. The second machine is the microship. This one is the more extraordinary of the two. It is a battle cruiser, a fully armed spacecraft capable of combat that Stewie shrinks down to the size of a single cell. He then shrinks himself along with it, enters Peter's body, and navigates the interior of his father's biology with the goal of destroying Peter's sperm before they can reach Lois's egg. The ship is armed with phaser cannons. The ship's computer is voiced by Majel Barrett, the widow of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, and the voice of the ship's computer in the actual Star Trek television series. This is a real casting choice that the show made. Stewie's microscopic battlecruiser, deployed inside his father's body, has the same voice as the computers on the Enterprise. Inside Peter's body, Stewie fights through the biological environment and eliminates nearly everything in his path. He is thorough and efficient and completely committed to the mission. He encounters one exception, a single sperm cell that appears to be just as intelligent and dangerous as Stewie himself. This is Bertram, who will return in later episodes as Stewie's nemesis and half-brother. Stewie lets Bertram survive this encounter, partly out of something like recognition. He sees himself in Bertram. He cannot bring himself to destroy something that mirrors his own intelligence back at him. The microship mission ultimately fails in its objective because Peter and Lois end up not conceiving a new child for reasons unrelated to Stewie's intervention. But as an engineering achievement, it stands apart from everything else in the early seasons. A battle cruiser that fits inside a human cell, phaser cannons, navigation through a human body, voiced by the widow of the man who created Star Trek. Stewie built this to prevent a pregnancy. The scale of the machine, relative to the scale of the problem, is perhaps the most extreme version of a pattern that runs through his entire arsenal. Season 3 also includes a hypnotic control device from the episode The Story on Page 1, used to harness the size and strength of Chris. In Peter Griffin, husband, father, brother from the same season, Stewie disguises himself as a cheerleader named Cindy and attempts to use the human pyramid formed during a cheer routine to access a mind control system he has placed at its top. The idea is that the cheerleader pyramid, viewed from a certain angle and configured correctly, can function as a vehicle for broadcasting his will to a crowd. It fails because the cheerleaders are too uncoordinated to hold the pyramid together, and Stewie ends up in a humiliating fall. Mind control through cheerleading choreography, another example of how the weapon Stewie chooses, tells you about the situation he is operating in. He is at a basketball game. The resources available are cheerleaders. He works with what he has. Brian Does Hollywood from Season 3 introduces a mass hypnosis device, which Stewie uses to attempt to control an unsuspecting public. This one is broader in its ambition than the earlier mind control device from the pilot. That one was used on a single judge. This one is aimed at groups. Season 4 and 5 continue to fill out the arsenal, though the weapons during this period are less consistently aimed at Lois and more aimed at the variety of obstacles and irritants that occupy Stewie's daily life. The pattern shifts slightly. The machines keep coming. The world domination angle gets more attention. But the core weapons philosophy, build something extraordinary, deploy it against a problem that does not remotely require it, watch something go wrong, stays consistent. What the full inventory reveals, when you lay it out in order, is something that the show itself never states directly, but that is visible in the progression. The early weapons, the laser gun, the carbonite freeze gun, are relatively simple tools. Point and shoot, point and freeze. They are personal in scale. They affect one person at a time. As the seasons progress, the weapons get bigger and more systemic. A time machine, a weather control device, a microscopic spacecraft, a mass hypnosis device. Stewie's ambitions are scaling up. The threat Lois represents stays constant. The tools Stewie builds to deal with that threat, and with every other obstacle in his world, keep growing. There is also something worth noting about what the weapons are made of. The show never explains where Stewie gets his materials. There is no scene of him ordering parts online or raiding a laboratory. The weapons simply exist when he needs them. The microship exists, the time machine exists, the carbonite freeze gun exists. The show treats Stewie's ability to construct these things as a given, as a fact of his character that requires no more explanation than Peter's ability to find his way to the drunken clam. It is just who he is. He builds. The things he builds work. Sometimes they work too well, and he has to undo them. Sometimes they fail because of Peter, or Chris, or the ordinary disaster of living in that house. But they always work on a technical level. Stewie's engineering is never the problem. The world around his engineering is always the problem. And through all of it, the laser sandwich, the carbonite gun, the microship with the Star Trek voice, the time machine, the weather control device, the cheerleader pyramid mind control scheme, Lois remains completely unaware that any of it exists. She is in the same house as a baby who has controlled the weather, entered her husband's body in a miniature spacecraft, and frozen an airport worker in solid carbonite for a decade. She has no idea. She kisses Stewie on the head. She cleans the house. She tells him Mommy will be with him in a little while. The arsenal is extraordinary. The target of the arsenal has never once suspected she is a target. Quote _6 __. That gap between the scale of what Stewie builds and the total obliviousness of the person he builds it against is about to meet its most significant complication. Because there is one episode in season 5 where Stewie stops building weapons aimed at Lois entirely, where he puts every plan away, where something happens that, for a brief and genuinely strange stretch of the show, makes him not want to kill her at all. The next section covers what it took to change Stewie's mind, and how completely and how briefly that change actually held. Section 5. When he stopped trying to kill her. Stewie loves Lois. Season 5, Episode 1. There is a teddy bear named Rupert. He appears in almost every Stewie scene across the entire run of the show. He sits in Stewie's room, he gets carried around, he gets talked to. Stewie treats him as a confidant, the one listener who is always available, always present, never going to misunderstand or dismiss what Stewie is saying. In a house where nobody can hear him, in a world where nobody takes him seriously, Rupert is the constant. Stewie tells Rupert things he tells nobody else. He plans in front of Rupert. He processes in front of Rupert. He loves Rupert in the most straightforward, uncomplicated way that Stewie Griffin loves anything. So when Rupert gets damaged, and Lois is the one who fixes him, something shifts. Stewie Loves Lois is the first episode of the 5th season of Family Guy. It originally aired on Fox on September 10th, 2006. The show had been canceled, brought back, and was now several seasons into its revival run. The 5th season opener had a lot of pressure on it to signal where the show was going, and what it chose to do with that pressure was spend a significant portion of its runtime on the strangest possible version of a Stewie and Lois story, one where Stewie does not want to kill her at all. The setup is simple. Rupert gets lost or damaged. The specific circumstances involve the beloved teddy bear ending up in a state that Stewie cannot fix himself. Lois finds Rupert and repairs him. She brings him back to Stewie in working order, good as new, the thing Stewie loves most in the world restored by the person Stewie has spent his entire life trying to destroy. Stewie rethinks everything. Not slowly, not reluctantly. He rethinks it immediately, completely, and with the same total commitment he brings to all of his positions. The woman who repaired Rupert cannot be his enemy. The woman who understood how important Rupert was and took the time to fix him is not someone he can keep pointing weapons at. He looks at Lois differently in the aftermath of this. He sees something he had either never noticed or had been working very hard to ignore, that she is capable of genuine acts of care, that she pays attention to what matters to the people in her house, that she is not just an obstacle wearing a human face. He becomes attached to her. This is where the episode gets genuinely strange. Stewie does not just soften toward Lois. He does not just lower his threat level and go about his business. He becomes clingy. He follows her around the house. He wants to be near her constantly. He wants her attention and her company and her presence in a way that goes well beyond what any normal mother-child dynamic would look like. Even accounting for the fact that Stewie is technically a toddler, he has replaced one extreme with another. The hatred has flipped into something that functions almost like obsession. The same intensity, pointed in a completely different direction. Lois finds this refreshing at first. Her youngest child, who she has always experienced as difficult and demanding in the ordinary baby sense, is suddenly warm and affectionate and eager to be around her. She takes it as a good sign. She enjoys it. It feels like a breakthrough in a relationship that had always felt slightly off, without her being able to explain why. Then it keeps going. The dependency escalates to a point where Lois cannot function normally. Stewie needs her attention every moment. He is underfoot constantly. He requires her presence in a way that starts to feel less like love and more like a kind of siege. She is not a mother with an affectionate baby anymore. She is a woman being followed around her own house by a 1-year-old who will not let her exist independently. Brian notices all of this. Brian notices everything in that house, which is his curse. He watches Stewie's transformation with the same tired, analytical eye he brings to all of Stewie's phases, and he makes a calculation. The attachment is not healthy. Stewie has gone from one extreme to another, and neither extreme is functional. Brian advises Lois to start ignoring Stewie, to deliberately withdraw the attention, to create some distance, and let Stewie learn that he cannot have unconditional access to another person just because he has decided he loves them. Lois takes this advice. She starts ignoring Stewie's demands for attention. again. She does not respond when he seeks her out. She moves through the house with the specific, deliberate absence that Brian recommended. Present in the building, but not available in the way Stewie has come to expect and require. She is pulling back by design, trying to break the unhealthy cycle before it gets worse. Then Stewie hurts himself. He falls down the stairs. It is an accident, the kind of thing that happens to toddlers with some regularity, because toddlers do not have great physical coordination, regardless of how sophisticated their interior life might be. He is hurt. He is on the floor. And Lois, hearing the noise and understanding that her child has been injured, immediately drops the strategy. She rushes to him. She tries to apologize for pulling away. She tries to show him that she is there, that she was not truly gone, that the withdrawal was tactical and not real abandonment. Stewie looks at her, and he returns to hating her. Not gradually, not with any visible internal struggle. The moment Lois drops her boundary and comes back to him out of guilt and parental instinct, the spell breaks. Something about the act of her coming back, the apology, the softening, the reassurance, flips the switch back. The affection is gone. The attachment dissolves. Whatever had opened in him when she fixed Rupert closes again. And the Stewie who looks up at Lois from the bottom of the stairs is the same Stewie who has been plotting her death since before he could walk. The episode makes this transition almost instantaneous. There is no extended mourning period. There is no wistful look backward at what could have been. Stewie is disgusted by what he sees in Lois's behavior. The apology, the guilt, the rushing back, and that disgust is enough to undo everything that Rupert's repair had built. She came back because she felt bad. He finds this contemptible. The affection required, apparently, a version of Lois who could hold her ground. The moment she could not, she stopped being someone he could love. This is a remarkably specific piece of character writing for a show that is primarily a comedy about a talking baby trying to murder his mother. The episode is not asking you to do a deep psychological reading of it. The laughs are real and consistent throughout, but the structure underneath the comedy is doing something thoughtful about how Stewie relates to Lois, how the same qualities in her that make her a good mother are exactly the qualities he cannot respect. Her care for him, her willingness to put him first, her instinct to come back when he is hurt. These are the things that make her Stewie's mother, and they are also the things that make her someone he looks at with contempt the moment they are on full display. The episode also contains a scene that runs in the opposite direction from everything described above. While Stewie is in his period of attachment and adoration toward Lois, Lois herself has a dream. In the dream, she murders Stewie. The show is careful to frame this as a dream. Lois is not actually homicidal. The show is not reversing the dynamic in any real sense, but the detail of it matters. Lois imagines killing her son during the period when he is being most suffocatingly affectionate. The dream is played for comedy. It is also the show acknowledging, in its own sideways way, that the relationship between them has always had a current of something darker running through it than standard mother-child warmth. Lois does not try to kill Stewie. She dreams about it once, during his most overwhelming phase of attachment, and then wakes up and goes back to her day. But the show put it in there. There is also a detail in the episode about the dream sequence itself. According to the show's own production records, the sound of Lois's footsteps when she goes down to the basement stairs during her dream of killing Stewie had to be adjusted multiple times. Stewie talking during that scene was altered several times, due to a lack of laughter from the audience during test screenings. This is a small production note, but it tells you something about how carefully the show was calibrating the comedy in that sequence, trying to find the exact tone that made the murder dream funny rather than unsettling. The Rupert detail is worth returning to before leaving this episode, because it is load-bearing for everything that follows. Rupert is the key. The thing that unlocked Stewie's capacity for affection toward Lois was not anything Lois did intentionally. She was not trying to win him over. She was not making a strategic move in any kind of emotional negotiation with her youngest child. She just fixed a toy that a baby loved. She did a small, kind thing for someone in her care, and that small, kind thing happened to be exactly the right thing to crack open a door that had been bolted shut since before Stewie was born. And then the door closed again. The show could have used this episode to permanently soften the Stewie and Lois dynamic. It could have treated Rupert's repair as the beginning of a new chapter. Stewie learning to see Lois differently, the matricidal obsession fading into something less extreme. Instead, it used it to show the cycle completing itself in real time. The attachment came from a small act of care. The return to hatred came from another small act of care. A different one, the apology at the bottom of the stairs, but care all the same. Lois cannot win. The things she does right are the things that open him up. The things she does right are also the things that close him back down. There is no version of Lois that Stewie can sustain love for, because sustaining love requires a version of himself that he cannot maintain either. The season 5 premiere chose to spend its time on this story, not on a new villain, not on a new plot for world domination, on a teddy bear getting getting fixed, and a baby falling down some stairs, and a relationship that reset to its default position with barely a pause. By the end of Stewie Loves Lois, the weapons are back on the table. The affection experiment is over. Lois goes back to being a target, in her pleasant and completely oblivious way, and Stewie goes back to being someone who wants her dead, in his precise and completely sincere way. The show has now established every layer of what this relationship is. The mythology, the weapons, the one brief window where it could have been something else and then was not. All that is left is the question that has been hanging over the entire show since the pilot. What happens when Stewie actually follows through? Not a plan that fails, not a simulation, not a dream sequence. What happens when he gets on a speedboat and finds Lois on a cruise ship and does the thing he has been promising to do since the first episode of season 1? __quote _8 ___. The next section covers the one person in that house who saw all of this clearly and never once warned anybody. Brian, the witness who watched 6 seasons of murder attempts and decided every single time that it was probably not worth mentioning. Section 6. Brian as the only witness. The running gag nobody else notices. There is a dog sitting in the living room of 31 Spooner Street who knows everything. He knows about the weapons. He knows about the plans. He knows about the laser gun disguised as a sandwich, the carbonite freeze gun, the time machine, the microchip that flew through Peter's body on a mission to destroy his sperm. He knows that the baby sitting in the high chair at the breakfast table has been actively trying to kill the woman making pancakes on the other side of the kitchen. He has known all of this since the beginning. He has never told anyone. Brian Griffin is the Griffin family dog. He is anthropomorphic, meaning he walks upright, talks, drinks martinis, smokes cigarettes, reads books, and holds opinions about literature and politics and the general state of the world. He is, in many ways, the most functional adult in that house, which is saying something given that the competition includes Peter. He is also, for the entire early run of Family Guy, the only character who fully understands what Stewie is doing and what Stewie is capable of, and he does nothing about it. This is the structural choice that makes the entire Stewie and Lois dynamic work as a long-running comedic premise. Without Brian as a knowing witness, all of Stewie's plans exist in a vacuum. They happen. Nobody registers them. The audience watches. The world inside the show remains completely unaware. That would work for a joke or two, but it could not sustain 6 seasons. You need someone inside the story who sees what the audience sees. Someone whose awareness confirms that this is real, that Stewie is genuinely dangerous, that the attempts on Lois are genuine attempts, that this is not a fantasy happening only in the baby's head. Brian is that confirmation. Brian's awareness is what makes the running gag something more than just a collection of unrelated Stewie scenes. He is the through line. He is the proof. The reason Brian never tells Lois is documented plainly in the show's own logic. He knows it would make him sound like he had completely lost his mind. Picture the conversation. Brian walks up to Lois, who is doing laundry or making dinner or helping Chris with homework, and says, "Your 1-year-old has been trying to kill you since the day he was born. He has a laser gun disguised as a sandwich. He once flew a microscopic spaceship into your husband's body to destroy his sperm, and you should probably be concerned." Lois would look at Brian the way any reasonable person looks at a dog who has just described a 1-year-old's assassination program. She would not believe him. Nobody would believe him. The story is not believable. And beyond that, Brian has done his own math on the situation. He has watched Stewie's attempts across multiple seasons. He has seen the carbonite freeze gun, the time machine, the Peterbot, all of it. He has watched every plan either fail on its own or get interrupted by the ordinary chaos of the Griffin household. His conclusion, reached early and maintained consistently, is that Stewie is never actually going to succeed. The plans are real. The intent is genuine. The follow-through is consistently, reliably, almost comically absent. Brian has essentially decided that Stewie is a threat in the same way that a very ambitious child's plan to dig a tunnel to China is a threat, sincerely meant, elaborately conceived, and ultimately going nowhere. This calculation makes Brian complicit in a way the show never fully addresses directly, but also never pretends is not happening. He is not neutral. He is not simply unaware. He knows. He has assessed the situation, and he has decided the assessment justifies his silence. The assessment might even be correct. Stewie has not killed Lois across multiple seasons of trying, but the calculation is still a choice. Brian chooses, every day, not to tell the woman in that house that her baby wants her dead. What makes this more interesting than simple negligence is that Brian and Stewie have a real relationship. It is one of the most consistent and genuinely functional relationships in the show. They talk to each other. They argue. They go on road trips together. They play off each other's intelligence in a way that neither of them can do with anyone else in that house. Brian is intellectually isolated in a family that does not operate at his level, and Stewie is linguistically isolated in a household where nobody can understand him. They find each other useful, and over time, they find each other necessary. So Brian is not staying silent about Stewie's plans because he does not care about either party.
He cares about both of them,
in his own complicated and sometimes self-serving way. He is staying silent because he has decided silence is the right call, and because some part of him has recognized that confronting Stewie about the murder plans would not stop them. It would only make Stewie more careful about hiding them. The dynamic between Brian and Stewie in the early seasons is not the warm, developed friendship it becomes later. In the first few seasons, Stewie views Brian as a tool and occasionally an obstacle. He uses Brian. He is dismissive of Brian in the way he is dismissive of almost everyone. But even in those early seasons, Brian is the one Stewie talks to. Not about his feelings. Stewie does not do feelings in the conventional sense, or at least he would deny it, but about his plans.
Brian is the audience for Stewie's monologues. He is the one who gets the explanations. He is the one who hears about the microchip and the Peterbot and the weather device. This means Brian knows more about Stewie's capabilities than anyone in the world. He has been given a front row seat to the full extent of what this baby can build and what he is willing to do. And he has sat in that front row seat, cocktail in hand, and watched the show without once feeling the need to warn the person the show is about. There is one specific scene from Stewie Kills Lois that makes this dynamic land with particular weight. It is the scene where Brian's dismissiveness becomes accidentally the thing that pushes Stewie over the edge. Stewie comes home from being left off the cruise and vows to kill Lois when she returns. This is not a new speech. Stewie has given versions of this speech before. Brian has heard it before. And Brian does what he has always done. He laughs it off. He points out plainly and accurately that Stewie has never followed through with any of his plans before and will not follow through this time either. Brian is right about the pattern. He has the data. Across multiple seasons, across multiple weapons and multiple attempts, Stewie has not succeeded. The pattern is real. Brian's reading of the pattern is reasonable. What Brian does not account for is what his dismissiveness does to Stewie. Because the moment Brian says it out loud, "You have never followed through, you never will," something changes in Stewie. Not anger exactly, though there is anger in it. Something more specific. Stewie realizes that Brian is correct. He has not followed through. And the realization that Brian has correctly identified a failure in him, that this assessment is accurate and available to someone who has been watching the whole time, is the thing that gives Stewie the resolve he has been missing. Brian's mockery is the push. Brian saying, "You will never do it," is what causes Stewie to decide that he absolutely will. The witness, who has been watching silently for seasons, the one who calculated that Stewie would never succeed, ends up being the direct cause of Stewie's most serious and nearly successful attempt on Lois's life. The dog who decided it was not worth mentioning accidentally gave the baby the motivation to make it worth mentioning. This is not something the show draws a big circle around. It is not treated as a dramatic irony moment with swelling music and a reaction shot. It is played relatively quickly as part of the setup for the episode, but the shape of it is clear. Brian's silence across 6 seasons contributed to the situation, and Brian's specific act of mockery in that moment contributed to its escalation. There is also a later moment in the 2-part arc that shows Brian's relationship to his own silence in a different light. After Stewie shoots Lois and she goes overboard and is declared missing, and a year passes, Brian finds evidence that Stewie actually followed through. He finds a receipt for the speedboat rental. He confronts Stewie. Stewie, in the way he sometimes does, lets something slip, an indirect confirmation that he actually killed Lois, framed in a way that reveals more than Stewie intended to reveal. And Brian's response to this confirmation is not relief that Lois is gone, or indifference dressed up as something else. He is disturbed. He is genuinely upset. He vows to expose Stewie and bring him to justice. The dog who spent 6 seasons deciding it was not worth warning Lois, suddenly, in the aftermath of her apparent death, discovers that he has a line. The line, it turns out, is actual murder. Failed attempts were one thing. A speedboat receipt and a confession and a missing woman are another. This shift in Brian matters because it clarifies what his silence had always been built on. He was not indifferent to Lois's life. He was not hoping Stewie would succeed. His calculation had always been that Stewie would fail, and in the comfort of that calculation, he had never had to decide what he would do if Stewie succeeded. The moment the calculation turned out to be wrong, the moment the failure he had been counting on did not materialize, Brian had to figure out who he actually was in this situation. He chose to try to expose Stewie. He chose Lois. Late, and only after the fact, and after 6 seasons of deciding it was not worth bringing up, but he chose her. The witness structure of the running gag tells you
you a lot about how Family Guy thought about comedy and consequence in its early years. Stewie's murder attempts are funny, partly because nobody takes them seriously. Lois does not know. Peter does not know. The kids do not know. The neighborhood has no idea. There is one person who knows, and he has decided not to say anything, and his not saying anything is part of what makes the whole thing possible. The comedy requires the silence. The silence requires Brian. Brian is not just a character in the Stewie and Lois story. He is a load-bearing part of the structure that holds the story up. Without Brian's silence, someone warns Lois somewhere in season 1, and the entire premise collapses. Without Brian's specific dismissal in the Stewie kills Lois setup, Stewie does not board a speedboat. Without Brian finding the receipt, the cover-up holds and Peter goes to prison. Brian is present at every critical turn of the running gag, as the silent witness, as the accidental motivator, as the late-arriving conscience. He is the only one who saw everything. He is the reason some of it happened, and he is the one who, when it finally mattered, decided to do something about it. Too late to prevent the attempt, but not too late to pursue the truth. 6 seasons of silence. 1 vow of justice. 1 dog who knew the whole time. __quote _9 __. That dog's dismissal of a pattern he had watched for years is what finally pushed the pattern into something real. The next section covers what real looks like. The cruise ship, the speedboat, the machine gun, and the moment Family Guy finally lets Stewie Griffin do the one thing he had been promising to do since the very first episode. Section 7. The most successful attempt. Stewie kills Lois. Season 6, Episode 4, November 4th, 2007. It started with a birthday dinner. The Griffin family is gathered at the table, celebrating Lois's birthday. The gifts are not good. Peter's gift is mediocre. Chris and Meg do not do much better. Brian, however, gives Lois something genuinely thoughtful, a pair of cruise tickets. Lois assumes immediately that the tickets are for her and Peter. Brian had intended to go with her himself, which the show makes clear through his visible disappointment when she extends the invitation to Peter instead of him. But he does not say anything. He lets it go. Lois is happy. Peter is happy. The cruise is booked. Nobody invites Stewie. This detail, the not inviting of Stewie, is the trigger for everything that follows across the next 2 episodes. Not a grand villain scheme, not a carefully laid plan that Stewie had been building for months. The thing that finally pushes Stewie Griffin from years of failed attempts into the most serious and nearly successful murder he has ever committed is the simple fact that his family went on a cruise and left him at home. He is furious. The moment Peter and Lois leave for the ship, Stewie is back at the house seething. He vows to kill Lois the moment she returns. He says this out loud. Brian is in the room. Brian responds the way he always responds, with dismissal. He points out that Stewie has said exactly this kind of thing before and has never followed through. He lists the pattern. He makes the reasonable case, backed by seasons of evidence, that Stewie is not actually going to do anything. What happens next has already been covered in the previous section. Brian's dismissal lands in Stewie as a challenge rather than a comfort. Stewie realizes Brian is right about the pattern and decides the pattern ends now. He does not wait for Lois to come home. He does not sit in the house and stew. He goes to the cruise ship. He gets there by speedboat. A 1-year-old navigating a speedboat across open water to reach a cruise ship alone in order to shoot his mother. The show presents this with the same casual confidence it has always used to present Stewie's more extraordinary logistical achievements. He needs to get to the ship. He gets to the ship. The how is not the point. The arriving is the point. On the cruise ship itself, Peter has been a disaster. He defecates on the poop deck, and when the ship's captain confronts him about it, Peter's defense is that it is called the poop deck, which he took as an instruction. He tells an inappropriate story at the captain's dinner table about how he and Lois once seriously considered not having Meg, framing it in terms that land as casually cruel rather than funny to everyone at the table. He thinks, and argues, that the lead actress in Titanic opposite Leonardo DiCaprio was Philip Seymour Hoffman rather than Kate Winslet. These are not small embarrassments. Each one is the kind of public humiliation that compounds the previous one, and Lois absorbs all of them in sequence. By the time Stewie arrives on the ship, Lois has had a serious falling out with Peter. She has gone out to the deck alone to get some air and sort through her frustration. She is standing outside, away from the dinner table chaos, trying to collect herself. She needs a moment of quiet. She goes out to find it. Stewie finds her there instead. She is completely astonished to see him. She cannot understand how he got on the ship without anyone knowing. She is looking at her baby standing on the deck of a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, having arrived via speedboat, and she is asking the reasonable question of how this is possible. For a brief moment, it is just a strange, slightly funny scene. The baby on the deck, the confused mother, the improbable reunion on a cruise ship neither of them was supposed to share. Then Stewie pulls out the machine gun. After a brief moment of tension, a pause where the show lets the reality of what is
happening settle, Stewie opens fire. The shots are not off screen. The show does not cut away or spare the audience the visual. Lois's chest is hit by multiple bullets. She falls backward over the railing of the ship.
Her body goes into the ocean, sinking down into the dark water below the surface. Stewie watches her go. He is ecstatic. He has done it. He has finally done the thing he has been promising to do since the first episode of the first season. And then he trips. He falls and hurts his arm. He is lying on the deck of a cruise ship, having just apparently murdered his mother, and he has hurt himself in the most ordinary baby way. A small tumble, a bumped arm. He says, ow. He recovers. He goes home. 6 days pass. Lois is considered missing. No body has been found. The search begins. Peter is distressed in a way that the show plays with a kind of awkward sincerity. He is not a man equipped for grief or uncertainty, and watching him navigate the disappearance of his wife is uncomfortable in the specific Family Guy way, where something is clearly meant to land as both sad and funny at the same time. Stewie behaves perfectly during these 6 days. He does not celebrate in front of anyone.
He does not reveal anything. He watches the family worry with the calm satisfaction of someone who knows the outcome and is waiting for the situation to resolve itself. He is not guilty about what he did. He has no visible internal conflict. He wanted this. He did this. He is now watching the aftermath of it with something close to professional detachment. Joe tells Peter, eventually, that the search has been called off. Lois has been missing long enough that the official position becomes that she is gone. Peter has to accept this. The family has to move forward. A year passes. The show skips ahead 12 months and shows what the Griffin household looks like in Lois's absence. Peter has started dating again. He has gone on dates with various women, including a woman with cancer, a literal stick figure, and Bonnie, his neighbor Joe's wife, though he talks Joe into occasionally posing as Lois so that her death does not emotionally damage Chris. The logic of this is very Peter. The execution of it is predictably a disaster. Chris has been told that Lois is away at a health spa. The fiction is being maintained for his sake. Meg, according to Stewie, has really begun to flourish in Lois's absence. The show plays this as a dark joke, the implication being that Meg's life has improved because the person who most consistently overlooked her is no longer in the house. Brian, during this period, is the one who starts to pull the thread. He has found the receipt for the speedboat rental, dated the day Lois went missing. He confronts Stewie. Stewie, in a moment of carelessness that is slightly out of character for someone who has otherwise handled the cover-up well, lets slip enough of a confirmation that Brian understands what happened. Brian tells Stewie that her death was an accident. Stewie corrects him. That is what everyone was led to believe, he says. That is not the same as what actually happened. Brian is disturbed and enraged by this and vows to expose Stewie and bring him to justice. Stewie, realizing the danger, disposes of the evidence. He throws away his gun and throws away the drawings he had made showing Lois being killed in various ways. He gets rid of anything that connects him to the crime. He is trying to eliminate the physical record of what he did before Brian can use it against him, but the timing goes wrong. Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland are searching the Griffin family trash. They have become suspicious of Peter, who has made a series of spectacularly incriminating statements at the Drunken Clam. He casually mentioned that he took out a life insurance policy on Lois during the cruise, specifically after a fight they had where he had secretly wished she were dead. He mentioned that this policy had now paid out. He said all of this out loud, in public, without any apparent awareness of how it sounded. So when Joe searches the trash and finds the gun and the drawings that Stewie just threw away, the gun and the drawings that connect someone in that house to Lois's murder, he looks at the handwriting on the drawings. He compares it to Peter's handwriting. He decides they match. He concludes that Peter killed Lois. This is an enormous stroke of luck for Stewie. He threw away his evidence at exactly the right moment for someone else to find it and blame the wrong person. He did not plan this. He did not engineer it. It just happened because Peter's handwriting and Stewie's handwriting look similar enough to fool a police officer who has already decided Peter is guilty. Stewie is ecstatic about this. He has not just committed what he believes to be a successful murder, he has accidentally constructed the perfect cover, framing his own father without any deliberate effort through the coincidence of similar handwriting and Peter's own extraordinary talent for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Peter is arrested. He goes to trial. Brian does everything he can to prevent Meg and Chris from believing their father is a murderer, navigating the courtroom situation with the specific exhaustion of someone who knows the truth and cannot say it in any way that would be believed. The prosecutor gets Peter to say things during his testimony that make him look more guilty with each answer, not through any great legal strategy, but because Peter is Peter and he cannot help himself. Peter is found guilty of murder in the first degree. He is about to be sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of release. The judge is ready to make it official. Then the courtroom doors open. A figure walks in. It is Lois, alive, visibly present, standing in the courtroom while her husband is about to be imprisoned for her murder. The reaction in the room is everything you would expect. Relief, confusion, the specific disorientation of a situation that has just completely reversed itself. Peter did not kill Lois. Peter cannot have killed Lois. Lois is standing in the courtroom. The family is overjoyed. Peter is cleared. The relief in the room is enormous and immediate. And then Lois, once the reunion has settled enough for her to speak clearly, points at Stewie. She tells the court that Stewie tried to kill her. She insists that he is evil. She explains what happened, that she was shot on the deck of the cruise ship, that she fell overboard, that she was rescued by what she describes as a reverse merman, that she developed a type of memory loss that wiped her recall of who she was and where she came from. She wandered the country without her memories, eventually ending up working at a fat camp in North Carolina called Camp Put Down a Forca, where her job was to prevent the overweight children from trying to eat each other. She met a man she thought was kind, who turned out to be a white supremacist. She went to a rally with him. She spoke out against the people there. Someone threw a bottle that hit her in the head. The impact restored her memory. She came back to Quahog. The courtroom does not know what to do with any of this. Everyone is in disbelief that a baby tried to kill his mother. Lois insists it is true. While the room is still processing, Stewie escapes. The episode ends there. The cliffhanger is complete. Stewie has gotten out of the courtroom. Lois is alive and has named him. The family is free, but the situation is not resolved. The show holds everything in suspension. The escape, the exposure, the fact that a 1-year-old is now a fugitive from justice, and cuts to a title card in the exact style of the Star Trek The Next Generation cliffhanger episode, The Best of Both Worlds, which aired in 1990 and became one of the most famous television cliffhangers ever made. The music cue at the end of Stewie Kills Lois is an original composition written specifically for the episode by the same composer who wrote the music for The Best of Both Worlds, Ron Jones, because Paramount would not give the show the rights to use the original track. Seth MacFarlane and writer David Goodman had wanted to use that specific music if the show ever reached 100 episodes. They planned for it years in advance. They got to 100 episodes, they could not use the original, so they had the man who wrote it write them a new version of it. The tribute landed exactly as intended. Stewie Kills Lois is the episode where 6 seasons of setup paid out. Everything before it, every failed plan, every weapon, every dismissal from Brian, every moment of Lois cheerfully not noticing, was building to the deck of that cruise ship. The machine gun, the bullets, the fall into the ocean, the year that followed, and then the courtroom doors opening and Lois walking in, and the finger pointing at the baby in the red overalls. What happened next? What Stewie did with his freedom? What Lois did with her knowledge? And how the show chose to resolve the thing it had been building since 1999 is what the next section covers. Section 8, The Simulation Reveal. Season 6, Episode 5, November 11th, 2007. The second episode picks up exactly where the first one left off. No time jump, no recap sequence beyond a brief news broadcast where the Channel 5 anchor Tom Tucker throws to field reporter Ollie Williams for a summary of the previous episode. Ollie Williams delivers his summary in his usual style. 4 words, maximum volume, 0 additional context. Stewie killed Lois, he announces. That is the recap. The show moves on. Lois is standing in the courtroom. She has just named Stewie as the person who shot her on the cruise ship. The room is full of people who cannot process this information. A baby tried to kill his mother. A 1-year-old planned and executed a murder attempt involving a speedboat and a machine gun. Everyone in that courtroom is looking at Stewie, and then looking at Lois, and then looking back at Stewie, and trying to make the math work. Lois insists she is not confused. She knows what happened to her, and she knows who did it. She fills in the full story for the court. The shooting on the deck, the fall into the ocean, the rescue by what she describes as a reverse merman, the memory loss, the wandering, the fat camp in North Carolina called Camp Put Down a Forca, where she worked to prevent overweight children from eating one another, the boyfriend who turned out to be a white supremacist, the rally she attended with him, her speaking out against the people there, the bottle thrown by an angry attendee that hit her in the head and restored every memory she had lost. She came back to Quahog. She came straight to the courtroom. The room takes all of this in. While the room is still taking it in, Stewie escapes. He does not fight his way out. He does not use a weapon or build something or deploy any of the technology that has defined his approach to problems throughout the show. He simply slips away in the confusion of the moment. A 1-year-old moving through a distracted courtroom while every adult in the room is trying to reconcile the idea that a baby is the subject of a murder investigation. Joe initiates a search. His team goes looking for Stewie across Quahog. They do not find him. The Griffins go home. Stewie is already there. He is sitting in the house waiting for them when they arrive, armed with a pistol, specifically a M1911A1, which the show's own records identify by its exact model name. He is calm. He is not paying panicking. He has had enough time since leaving the courtroom to get home, assess the situation, and decide on a course of action. The course of action is to take the family hostage. He knows his crime is no longer a secret. He knows the family now understands what he is. The era of Lois being oblivious is over. The era of Brian being the only one who knew is over. Everyone in that house is now aware that the baby has been trying to kill the mother and has come closer than anyone realized to succeeding. Stewie ties the family to chairs. Cleveland, who is not a griffin and has no particular reason to be at the house at this specific moment, walks in through the front door in the casual way that neighbors do in sitcoms. Just dropping by, no knock, no warning. Stewie shoots him. Cleveland is killed in front of the terrified family. The show plays this moment with a specific dark matter-of-factness. Cleveland is just there, and then Cleveland is not. Stewie notes, after the fact, that neither the police nor the press would ever overlook the disappearance of a black man, framing the murder as a logistical calculation rather than an act of rage. He ties the family down and forces Brian at gunpoint to drive him to CIA headquarters in Langley Falls, Virginia. This is where the episode shifts from a hostage situation into something considerably larger. Stewie and Brian pose as CIA agents to gain access to the building. Once inside, Stewie locates the CIA's supercomputer and uses it to take control of the entire planet's electrical power grid. He threatens to shut off electricity across the whole world unless his demands are met. The CIA, faced with this threat from a 1-year-old, has no good options. They submit to his demands. Stewie becomes president of the world. The show takes this seriously within its own terms. Stewie broadcasts his new authority from the White House. He implements a series of laws, some of which reflect genuine grievances, and some of which reflect the specific and personal priorities of a 1-year-old with global power. Direct-to-video Disney films are banned. Everyone is required to throw apples at Peter specifically, which is personal. Sexual activity of any kind is made illegal and punishable by death. Stewie, being 1-year-old, has no understanding of or interest in sex and sees no reason it should exist. Quagmire, for whom the absence of sexual activity is equivalent to removing air from a sealed room, responds to this law by taking up origami. He makes thousands of origami swans while visibly sweating and shaking, functioning like someone going through withdrawal, because for Quagmire, this is essentially what is happening. The milk of Hilary Swank is declared the official milk of the world. Concentration camps are established for people imprisoned for a variety of offenses that reflect Stewie's personal irritations. In the DVD version of the episode, Stewie performs a full musical number, a version of a song called I've Got a Little List from a famous old operetta called The Mikado, in which he lists all the categories of people he intends to have executed. This number was cut from the original broadcast version. The song covers everyone from the person who cuts in line to the entire cast of the television show Entourage, who are sentenced to death simply for being on the show. Stan Smith and Avery Bullock, characters from American Dad, another animated show created by Seth MacFarlane that aired on the same network, attempt to intervene on behalf of the United States government. They are helpless. Stewie's control of the power grid makes conventional resistance impossible. The world's governments submit. President Stewie broadcasts his oppressive new policies from the Oval Office, and they reach every corner of the planet. Tom Tucker and Diane Simmons, the Channel 5 news anchors, cover the broadcast. It is seen by the Griffins, still tied to their chairs at home. It is seen by Joe and Quagmire and Cleveland, though Cleveland, having been shot by Stewie earlier in the episode, is at this point deceased. The show handles Cleveland's brief appearance in heaven with its characteristic indifference to consequence. He arrives, encounters some kind of policy issue related to credit card imprints, and that is the last we hear of it. Lois watches the broadcast from somewhere outside the house. She is free. She was not there when Stewie took the family hostage. She watches her infant son announce his global dominance from the White House and makes a decision. She is going to kill him. She arms herself with weapons from Stewie's own weapons vault, which the family discovered and accessed during their time tied up in the living room. This detail is important. Lois is not improvising with kitchen knives or whatever she can grab from the garage. She is going into battle against her son using the same category of weapons he has been stockpiling against her for years. She is going to war with his own arsenal. She crashes through the window of the Oval Office. What follows is a long, violent, and genuinely committed fight sequence between a suburban housewife and her 1-year-old son, both armed to a degree that makes the setting, the actual Oval Office of the United States, feel completely appropriate for the scale of the conflict. They are evenly matched in a way that makes no physical sense and complete dramatic sense. Neither of them is holding back. The fight goes back and forth. Lois gains the upper hand. She has Stewie in a position where she could end it. She cannot do it. She stops. She looks at Stewie, at the baby in the red overalls who has shot her, framed her husband for her murder, taken her family hostage, killed a neighbor, and seized control of the world's electrical infrastructure, and she cannot pull the trigger. He is still her baby. Whatever he has done, and whatever he is capable of, and whatever he has made very clear he intends to do to her, she cannot bring herself to kill her own child. She drops her weapon. She surrenders. Stewie, who has no such hesitation, takes the opportunity. He moves to kill her. Peter enters the room. He shoots Stewie twice, once in the chest and once in the head. Stewie is killed. Peter attempts to deliver a one-liner from the movie Lethal Weapon 2 after shooting his son, which Brian immediately points out does not fit the context of the situation. Peter thinks about it, comes up with a different movie quote, and Brian acknowledges that the second one is marginally better. This exchange happens immediately after Peter has just shot his infant son twice in the Oval Office, while the rest of the world watches. Peter and Lois stand over Stewie's body. Despite everything, despite the shooting on the cruise ship, the year of being missing, the hostage situation, Cleveland's death, the global takeover, the fight in the Oval Office, they hold each other in silence over the body of their son. The show does not play this moment for laughs. It sits in it. These are two people who have just lost their child, regardless of what their child was doing when he died, and the show gives that weight a moment to exist before moving on. Then the words, "Simulation over," appear on the screen. The camera pulls back to reveal Stewie sitting in a strange chair-like device in his room. Brian enters with a postcard from Peter and Lois, who are on the cruise and apparently having a fine time. He finds Stewie coming out of the device and asks what he was doing. Stewie explains. The entire 2-episode arc, the shooting on the cruise ship, the year without Lois, Peter's trial, the courtroom reveal, the escape, Cleveland's death, the CIA takeover, the fight in the Oval Office, Peter shooting Stewie, the grief over the body, all of it was a computer simulation. Stewie built a device capable of running an extremely detailed simulation of what would happen if he actually killed Lois, and he ran it to see how the plan would play out. The answer the simulation gave him was badly. Brian immediately points out that people watching a hypothetical version of these events would probably feel cheated by the revelation that it was all a simulation, that spending 2 episodes on a story and then revealing it was a computer program is exactly the kind of ending that frustrates an audience. Stewie counters by saying that at least the simulation did not end the way the final episode of The Sopranos ended, where it just cut to black in the middle of a sentence. As Stewie is delivering this line, the show cuts to black before he can finish saying the word sentence. The joke lands. The episode ends. Stewie tells Brian that things did not work out particularly well for him in the simulation, and that his plans for killing Lois and taking over the world will have to wait. He gets out of the chair. The postcard from Peter and Lois is sitting on the table. The cruise is going well. Nobody was shot on the deck. Nobody fell overboard. Nobody spent a year at a fat camp in North Carolina. The world's power grid was never threatened. Cleveland is alive. The cliffhanger ending of Stewie Kills Lois, with its Star Trek tribute music and its to be continued title cards, music written specifically for the episode by Ron Jones, who wrote the original Star Trek music that McFarlane and writer David Goodman had wanted to use for years, but could not get the rights to, led an audience through a week of genuine uncertainty about where the show was going. The 2 episodes aired on November 4th and November 11th, 2007, and they were the last episodes to air before the Writers Guild of America went on strike that same month. McFarlane joined the strike and stopped production on Family Guy entirely during that period. The simulation reveal is the most discussed creative choice in both episodes. Some viewers felt it was a cheat, that building to a real consequence and then pulling it back with a dream sequence device was a way of having it both ways, of telling the story without accepting its implications. Others felt the simulation framing was consistent with Stewie's character, that of course a baby genius would run a detailed computer model before attempting something this significant, and that the simulation ending badly is actually a meaningful story beat. Stewie learns from the simulation. The simulation shows him that killing Lois leads, eventually, to his own death at the hands of his father. He decides the plan needs more time. __quote _13__. What nobody disputes is that the 2 episodes together represent the most complete and ambitious thing the show ever did with the Stewie and Lois dynamic. 6 seasons of failed attempts, of weapons and plans and Brian's silence and Lois's obliviousness, all brought to a point and then reset. The reset is what the next section is about, because after the simulation ends and Stewie gets out of the chair, something changes in the show. The attempts become less frequent, the obsession fades, and eventually the running gag that defined an entire era of Family Guy quietly disappears. What happened to Stewie after the simulation is a story the next section tells in full. Section 9, After the Simulation, How the Show Retired the Gag. Stewie gets out of the chair. Brian is standing there with the postcard. The
cruise is going fine. Peter and Lois are having a perfectly ordinary time on the ship that, in the simulation, became the location of a machine gun murder. Nobody was shot, nobody fell overboard, nobody spent 12 months missing. The world is exactly as it was before Stewie sat down in the device and ran his extremely detailed model of what killing Lois would look like in practice. He looks at the postcard. He tells Brian that things did not work out well for him in the simulation. He says his plans will have to wait. And then, gradually, quietly,
across the seasons that follow, they stop. Not immediately. The show does not cut from the simulation reveal directly to a version of Stewie who has no interest in hurting anyone. The transition takes time, and it is not a clean line. The attempts continue in a smaller way through the seasons directly following the two-part arc. There are moments in Season 7 and Season 8 where Stewie still gestures toward the old behavior. A threat here, a weapon there, a comment that sounds like the original version of the character briefly surfacing. But the frequency drops sharply. The commitment drops sharply. The plots that used to be entirely organized around getting to Lois and eliminating her become plots organized around other things entirely, with the occasional Lois-related comment appearing as a callback rather than a driving force. By Season 9, the arc is completely gone. Not paused, not on hold, gone. The show itself acknowledges this, though in its own sideways way. The references to Stewie trying to kill Lois that appear in the later seasons are almost always meta jokes. Jokes about the fact that Stewie used to do this and does not anymore. The show winking at the audience about its own history rather than actually revisiting it. Characters occasionally mention the old behavior in a way that signals awareness that it belongs to an earlier chapter. The joke is no longer the attempt. The joke is the memory of the attempt. This shift was intentional. Seth MacFarlane and the writing staff made a deliberate decision to move Stewie away from the supervillain baby identity as the show progressed. The reasoning, which MacFarlane has discussed in various interviews and commentary tracks, was that the character and the jokes around that version of him were starting to feel dated. The evil genius baby plotting to kill his mother worked in Season 1 because it was new and strange, and the show was establishing what kind of show it was going to be. By the time the show reached Season 6 and 7, running the same basic premise, Stewie plots against Lois, plan fails, reset, was producing diminishing returns. The character needed somewhere new to go. Where he went was toward Brian. The friendship between Stewie and Brian, which had always been present in the background of the show, became the central relationship of Stewie's storylines in the post-simulation era. The road trip episodes, the conversations in confined spaces, the genuine emotional exchanges that would have been impossible in the early seasons when Stewie was primarily a threat delivery system, these became the main thing the show did with Stewie. He stopped being the character who wanted to kill Lois and started being the character who went on adventures with Brian, who processed his feelings through their friendship, who grew in ways the original version of the character had no room to grow. The weapons did not disappear entirely. Stewie still builds things. He still has access to technology that no one-year-old should possess, but the technology stopped being aimed at Lois and started being aimed at other targets, adventures, time travel, personal vendettas against people who were rude to him at the mall, the ordinary conflicts of a baby genius navigating a world that was not built for him. The scale of the ambition stayed, the specific target changed. There is one moment in the post-simulation era that stands apart from everything around it, and it is worth examining in full because it says something specific about what the show was doing with the retirement of the gag. It comes from the Season 9 premiere, the episode called "And Then There Were Fewer." The episode is structured as a murder mystery. A large group of characters are invited to a mansion, and someone starts killing them off. One of the people in danger is Lois. A character named Diane Simmons, the Channel 5 news anchor who had appeared throughout the show's run, turns out to be the killer. She has a specific reason for wanting Lois dead, and she gets Lois into a position where she is about to carry out the murder. Stewie shoots Diane Simmons with a sniper rifle before she can do it. He saves Lois's life. He kills the person who was about to kill his mother. And the line he delivers in that moment is one of the most revealing things the character says across the entire run of the show. After taking the shot, Stewie states plainly that if anyone is going to take that woman down, it is going to be him. He uses a word for Lois in that line that is not particularly flattering. The specific word is documented in the show's records of the episode. The sentiment underneath the word is what matters. Stewie is not saving Lois because he loves her and wants her safe. He is saving Lois because she is his. The matricidal obsession has not become warmth. It has become something more like ownership. She is his target. She has always been his target. Nobody else gets to be the one who ends her. The protection is real. The reason for the protection is completely in keeping with who Stewie has always been. This moment is the clearest signal the show ever gives that retiring the running gag did not mean erasing the history behind it. Stewie is not a different person after the simulation. He has
not reformed. He has not decided that Lois deserves to live because he has come to love her, or understand her, or see her differently. He has decided, based on the data the simulation provided, that the plan is not ready yet. And in the meantime,
nobody else gets to be the one who acts on it. The character who emerged from the simulation era and developed through seasons 8, 9, and beyond is genuinely different from the one who built the laser gun disguised as a sandwich in the pilot. He is more openly emotional. He has a real friendship with Brian that he acknowledges and values. He has moments of vulnerability that the season 1 version of him would have found contemptible. He sings, he dances, he falls in love with people in ways that the original supervillain baby had no space for. He becomes, as the show itself describes it in various places, an eccentric and flamboyant character, rather than a violent and dangerous one. But the history does not go away. The show knows it is there. The audience knows it is there. And the meta jokes about the old behavior, the callbacks, the winking references to the running gag that used to define the character, are the show's way of keeping that history present without returning to it. It was there, it ended. The ending was a simulation revealing that the plan would result in Stewie's own death, and the character who emerged from that simulation went in a different direction. The writing staff's decision to retire the gag when they did, at the point they did, was the right call for reasons beyond just the character feeling dated. The 2-part arc in season 6 was the natural endpoint of everything the show had been building. The pilot established the premise, the early seasons built the arsenal and the mythology. Stewie Loves Lois showed the one moment the cycle could have broken and did not. The 2-parter showed the ultimate version of what the premise was always pointing toward. Stewie actually following through, the consequences of that playing out in full, and the resolution landing on a note that was both a genuine payoff and a careful reset. Trying to continue the running gag after that would have been running it past its endpoint. The simulation did not just resolve the story within the show, it resolved the story for the audience. The question the show had been asking since the pilot, will Stewie actually kill Lois, had been answered. Not in reality, but in the most thorough way the show could manage without permanently altering its premise. A simulation where he succeeds, the consequences unfold completely, and the outcome for Stewie is bad enough to give him pause. After that, continuing to run the same premise would have been repetition without purpose. So the show did what it rarely does with its running jokes. It let this one end. It moved the character forward. It found new things for Stewie to be. The new things turned out to be good. The Brian and Stewie road trip episodes are among the most beloved in the show's later run. The emotional conversations between them, particularly in episodes that put them in confined spaces and strip away the usual cutaway comedy, revealed layers of Stewie that the matricide era never had room for. The show got something genuinely new out of a character who had seemed like he might be defined by one joke forever. __quote _14__. But before all of that, before the road trips and the friendship and the flamboyant scamp who replaced the supervillain baby, there was one more conversation that needed to happen. The show waited a very long time to have it. More than 400 episodes, in fact. When it finally came, it involved marijuana, a kitchen, and the first real conversation Stewie and Lois ever had where she could actually understand every word he was saying. What Stewie told her in that conversation about why he wanted to kill her, about what the hatred was actually built on, is something the next section covers in full. Section 10, the retroactive explanation. Episode 450, and what Stewie finally admits. More than 400 episodes into the run of Family Guy, the show did something it had never done before. It let Lois hear Stewie. Not in the way the audience hears him. Not filtered through the joke that everyone in the house is oblivious to the genius baby talking in full sentences about his plans for world domination. Actually hear him. Understand him. Process what he is saying and respond to it in real time, as a conversation between two people who know each other, rather than a monologue delivered to someone who hears only baby sounds. The vehicle for this was marijuana. Family Guy crossed its 450th episode milestone and chose to mark the occasion with a story about Lois and Stewie finally being able to talk to each other. The specific episode aired during the show's later run, long after the matricide arc had ended, long after Stewie had become the flamboyant eccentric rather than the supervillain baby. The premise is simple. Lois, under the influence of marijuana, finds that she can suddenly understand everything Stewie is saying. The drug does something to the way she processes sound, or the way she processes language, and the barrier that has existed between them since the pilot episode of the first season dissolves. They talk. The conversation that follows is described by people who watched and wrote about the episode as unexpectedly real. Not played entirely for laughs. Not structured around a joke that undercuts everything being said. Two characters who have existed in the same house for the entire run of the show
who have been in the same room for hundreds of episodes without ever actually communicating, sitting down and saying the things that have been underneath the surface the whole time. Stewie tells Lois things about her life that he has been observing for years. He talks about Peter. He talks about how the family treats her. He has watched, from his position as the baby in the high chair and the toddler on the floor and the 1-year-old that nobody takes seriously, how the people in that house walk all over Lois on a daily basis. He has seen it clearly because he has always seen everything clearly. His intelligence has never been in question. What has been in question, across the entire run of the show, is what he does with what he sees. What he has been doing, it turns out, is watching. He tells Lois that she is a doormat. He uses that word, or words that mean the same thing. He describes what he has observed, the way Peter ignores her, the way the kids take her for granted, the way she absorbs all of it and keeps going because that is what she does. He is not saying this to be cruel. He is saying it because it is what he has seen, stated plainly, in the way Stewie has always stated things. Lois hears all of this, and she responds in a way that surprises him. She already knows. She is not unaware of her situation. She has not been oblivious to the dynamics of her own home the way she has been oblivious to Stewie's murder plots. She sees it. She has just made a decision about it. A practical, forward-looking decision that Stewie, with all his intelligence, had not fully accounted for. Peter is going to die of a heart attack within a relatively predictable number of years. When that happens, Lois's trust fund from the Pewterschmidt family money kicks in. She has a plan. She is not a victim of her circumstances. She is someone who has made a calculation about how to navigate them until the conditions change. This lands differently than Stewie expected. He came into the conversation, or arrived at this part of it, with the implicit assumption that Lois needed to be told what was happening to her, that she was not seeing clearly, that the woman who had spent decades not noticing the weapons her baby was building was similarly not noticing the way her family was treating her. It turns out she was noticing. She just had a different response to it than Stewie would have chosen. Then the conversation turns to the murder attempts. Lois brings it up. She tells Stewie that she knows he wanted to kill her early in the show's history, that this surprises her, that she has felt, across all the years of his life, that she and Stewie were never fully connected, that there was always something slightly off in their relationship that she could not identify or explain. Now she is hearing the explanation. Stewie tells her why. The answer he gives is the most honest thing the character has ever said about his own motivations across the entire run of the show. He does not reach for the mythology of the womb or the ovarian Bastille or the man in white. He does not describe Lois as an obstacle to his plans or a jailer who kept him confined. He gives a real answer, a human answer, an answer that reframes everything that came before it. He says he might have wanted to kill her as a way of putting her out of her misery. He saw how she was treated. He saw the doormat dynamic. He saw a woman absorbing mistreatment from her family day after day and continuing to function and continuing to be warm and continuing to take care of everyone around her without anyone taking care of her. And somewhere in the first seasons of his life, that picture became something he could not tolerate. Not because he hated her, because he could not stand watching it. But then he goes further. He gives the real reason, the deeper one underneath the doormat explanation. He is afraid that whatever is in Lois that makes her that way might be in him too. He looks at her and he sees something, a capacity for absorbing pain without fighting back, a willingness to put other people first at the cost of herself, a kind of softness that survives everything thrown at it and keeps going. And he is terrified that he carries the same thing, that it is in him genetically, biologically, unavoidably, that the part of Lois that could never hold her ground against the people who walk over her is sitting inside Stewie, waiting to surface, waiting to make him into a version of the thing he has spent his entire life defining himself against. He wanted to kill that part before it could take him down. He was not killing Lois. He was trying to kill the weakness he was afraid she had passed on to him. She was the target because she was the source. The machine gun on the cruise ship, the laser guns in the early seasons, the time machine and the carbonite freeze gun and the microchip, and every plan and every failed attempt, all of it was pointed at the thing inside himself that he was not ready to acknowledge. This is the explanation the show had been sitting on for more than 20 years of episodes. Lois hears it. She does not respond with horror or anger or the specific, complicated grief of a mother hearing that her child tried to kill her because he was afraid of becoming her. She responds with love. She loves Stewie. She reaches the part of the conversation where a different person might pull back or go quiet or need time to process, and she moves forward instead. They reach a new level of understanding. The conversation goes places that 400 episodes of the show had never been able to go because the barrier between them, them. The language barrier, the one-way communication that had defined their dynamic since the pilot, had never been lifted before. And then the marijuana wears off. The drug fog lifts. Lois goes back to being unable to understand what Stewie is saying. Stewie goes back to being a baby whose words are not registering as words to the person in front of him. The conversation ends not because either of them chooses to end it, but because the chemical condition that made it possible stops being a condition. Everything they said to each other, the doormat observation, Lois's plan about the trust fund, the explanation for the murder attempts, the fear of inherited weakness, the love that came through anyway, is still true. It was all real. It happened. Neither of them remembers it. The episode makes clear that the growth between them, the understanding that was reached, does not carry forward. The drug wore off and took the memory with it. They wake up the next morning, or they move through the rest of the day as the same people they were before the conversation. Lois does not know what Stewie told her. Stewie does not have the memory of having said it. The barrier is back up. The dynamic is back to its default. This ending is the show being honest about something it has always known about itself. Family Guy does not carry consequences forward in any permanent way. Characters reset. Situations resolve and then are forgotten. The show runs on a version of time where growth is possible within an episode, and then the episode ends and the slate is clean again. The 450th episode could not change that even if it wanted to. The most honest conversation Stewie and Lois ever had vanished with the drug that made it possible. But it happened. Within the world of the show, in whatever sense things that happen in that world are real, it happened. Stewie told his mother the truth. The truth was not that he hated her. The truth was that he was afraid of her, of the part of her that lived in him, of the softness he could not afford to let survive inside himself if he was going to be the person he needed to be. The laser guns and the carbonite freeze gun and the machine gun on the cruise ship were not the actions of a child who wanted his mother dead. They were the actions of a child who was trying to destroy something in himself before it could grow. Lois fixed Rupert, and Stewie loved her for a week. Lois got shot and fell off a cruise ship and came back and named him in a courtroom. Lois sat in a kitchen and heard every word he said for the first and only time, and then forgot all of it by morning. The running gag that started with a laser gun disguised as a sandwich in the pilot episode of January 1999 really ended, not with the simulation reveal in season 6, but with this conversation in the 450th episode, because the simulation told you what the plan would cost. The conversation told you what the plan was always about. A baby who was afraid of becoming his mother, who built weapons instead of saying that out loud, who spent 6 seasons pointing those weapons at the person he was most afraid of resembling. That is the whole story. From the dinner table in the pilot to the kitchen in the 450th episode, across more than 2 decades of television, that is what the running gag was always about. And Lois never got to keep the answer. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.